Recording in progress.
Jesus.
Ah.
That startled me. I look like
Yeah, I figured something happened. Well, good. That you should have gotten an invite or something.
Yeah, I
Did
did
ya?
receive email this time.
Okay, good. Did a slightly. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, I just had to turn it. Oh, his camera isn't on either. Let's see. I got to go to start video. There we go. Have you ever worked with LED lights, strips?
Not the strips themselves, but I've worked with LED.
Like that?
Not like that, no.
Yeah, I bumped into these I don't know, 4 months or so ago, and I really haven't done a lot with them except buy things. But basically, I 3D printed this column that wraps, the strip wraps around, and it goes on this base to like that. I gotta cut it to make it fit. That's the lamp base. Then here's the lamp. Isn't it beautiful? That's 3D printed stuff.
Yeah.
And I've tested it, so when I put that light bar in, it really does glow nicely. I got friends who are into bees, and one of them's put 5 or 6 hives up on our property out in. So I don't even want to mow now because I'm taking away bee food. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And so I'm making them some honey. I also made this. It was like a honeycomb pencil stand. This took 65 hours to print.
Wow.
Yeah. Or the lamp takes about that long too. But anyway, I have a drone to do that. I'm hoping to make some money with. I'm going to get my drone pilot license and all that. Anyway, I don't want to go on and on about that, but he said, our neighbor has all these round hay bales they've rolled up in her field. There's laying there, and he goes, it's really beautiful. I said, yes, I drove by one morning and saw that. It is nice looking, kind of pleasant. And he goes, it'd be cool if you would take a drone picture. So I went over there to sat at his driveway with the drone at sunrise. Nothing worked. So I came back home, and then I launched the drone. And even though the corn is up and I can't see his house from here, I'm able to see it with the camera drone. And I flew over there about 3,000 feet away. I took the pictures. They turned out okay, but I want to do better. I'm going to do it again tomorrow at his house. But then the drone started going. I said, because it has a thing where you just push a button and it returns home, which has always worked perfectly. I mean, it'll land within a foot of where it started every time. Yeah, so it starts telling me stuff like strong winds, can't come home. It's like losing signal, and I'm like, God damn it! I'm going to lose this $2,000 drone in a cornfield. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
it's insured and stuff. I can get my money back, or you know, but yeah, and it made it back, but even overhead, you know, and I said, okay, you know, return home. Same shit. It shot up 300 feet in the air and just, it said strong winds, losing. And I'm like, what the anyway. They're fascinating, but, and they're not as hard to control as I thought, but man, I'm always nervous about it. Okay, so are we going to try to go longer today to make up for the last couple of days?
Yeah.
Are you feeling better?
Yeah, a little bit. My voice is back, but my nose and stuff, or my nose and throat are still sore. And my jaw is starting to hurt a little bit from the physical therapy, but I'm good to go.
Yeah, I got up at 4 this morning, and because that neighbor was coming over to chop trees down and harvest wood, and which I did. And I came back in at 11, just soaking sweat, and just passed out and took a nap for half an hour. But yeah, it was weird. Anyway, so one of the things that we talked about at the end of last session was, I said, what would you do differently now that we've introduced the story and main characters? We had the protagonist, antagonist, major the only character left is, to me, is Snowden. So anyway, what do you have any thoughts along that line? Improvement? What would you do differently?
Honestly,
Whatever.
I really like the way with each of the individual characters you did introduce them, because you give them their own moments that we get to see that develop more. Like Siska's introduction gives us more of that hopelessness that you want her to feel. And with Harlow, we see his main focus and his goal. And I can't pronounce his name still. Turgenev?
Yeah, Turgenev. But maybe
Turgenev.
we'll change it to something else someday.
It's good as it
Boris.
is.
Boris. That was always the old funny Russian name from the cartoon strips.
Yeah.
Did you, Boris and Natasha, mean anything?
He's got a very good psychotic introduction.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's all brought up yet, but yeah, so basically, yeah, we got the characters going, we got to think about character arcs. So we got I'm just gonna really run through it today, but just a minute. Let's see. There was something I was going to say about the theme. You know, we talked about theme. And I thought, well, you know, I never really finished it or talked about it. So I just wanted to go into that a little bit. Basically, if you were to say, you know, when we talked about the theme, I talked about, well, this is my 1984. This is a science fiction thing, totalitarian future that bad and government is bad, you know, that kind of thing. Dystopias are bad because what they anyway. And yeah, that's there, but I think the theme has to be a little strong. Like, okay, well, that's all true, but the theme is that one of them is that this is a cyclical sort of thing. Remember that quote by Browning or something about how everything happens and then it happens again. Anyway, that phrase.
Yeah.
Because I think we're in a constant battle against government totalitarianism. And you go back and it's just a normal, that's just the way it is. If you look at human beings as animals, simple, as this, animal, then we're an animal kingdom, social culture, blah, blah, blah. And thus we have people running things for us. And over time, their power accumulates and they go nuts and start, then we rebel and do it again. Whether it's religion or money or feudal kingdoms, we always have the powerful. And we have that now, and they're going crazy. So we have to rise up and do what we can. Because, I think what 1984, what Orwell was trying to say is that once the government has that total power, then it's, how are we going to beat it?
Mm-hmm.
But the point I'm making is that not only are those who put their faith in government to save their collective asses, let's say, it fails. It can't do it. They think it can. They hope it can. But and maybe that's the way these people have to replace religion with secular belief in government as their God, as their God, as their anyway. So what I'd like to say is that the theme is the struggle against that. That's what these guys are. Terrorists or freedom fighters fighting against a totalitarian system, which has every tool except one. That is a AGI named Snowden. All right. So, all right. I'm getting the book up. All right. So we're here at what's called Siska Morning After. So now Harlow's arrived in town. Just a little bit of meeting him. Then we return our attention to Siska. The quote at the top of the story is, "They'll live the truth later by something called Z." This is actually true. I didn't make that up. I just kind of like the line, "They'll live the truth later." I have another line, some other chapter with that heading up there from Alison Weiss, one of my favorite independent singer-songwriters, who's now Jonathan Allison Weiss because she changed from anyway, now she's a guy. But I love her music or his music or whatever it is. All right. So anyway, not much going on here. Again, we're just meeting. This is Siska's world. Again, some exposition, which some of it could be removed. Yeah. And then we meet her roommate, Dora. Her mom we don't meet now because they're working and sleeping and so. So basically, I'm trying to present it as if Siska has roommates, forced roommates, just like the Russian crowded apartment thing, back in the Cold War. And then don't even know everyone there. They're on rotating shifts and she's got a room. You'll notice when she wants to hide her, she has to take stuff back to her room, like that sugar, store it to keep it safe, even in her own home. And we mentioned some little old lady was arrested for practicing religion some time ago. One of the early lines, I think, there's that weak, like the lamp emitting a weak yellow light. Even the electricity sucks. Anyway, that's because I'm just presenting technology in decline. And we're all living in that. So then we get the surprise, I think, yeah, the earlier, isn't this where Siska finds out that she got sugar from a going away present?
I believe so.
Anyway, nothing more to say. Just some exposition, meeting the roommate, and then we meet John Kilver, who's her boss. Now, their initial conversation, it went real fast. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but Siska tried to sound cheery, pulled away from his perch and gave her all. He knows what's going on in her life because they're work colleagues. So she's gone, and they know who he's referring to because he's involved in her life. She sniffed at him. Must be that detective. So do you see that? This is Siska being snarky a little bit.
Yeah.
Does that come through?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Must be that anyway. And then they keep walking. So he continues probing about what's going on. We're getting a little that he mentions Becca. We have a little foreshadow. I came back and tossed that in here because later on, but it says Siska wanted to change the subject. She said, "How's Becca? His wife had been sick lately." You know, later on, I think you've read she's got some kind of inability to have kids,
Ah, yeah.
maybe cancer, but she's anyway. That's so, and that we just mentioned that here, so it'll tie in later. I can think it's kind of important to do that. Usually, it's. I mean, I could be mistaken, and you can tell, but basically, when it comes to foreshadowing and stuff like that, or thinking that, well, you know, this is coming up, so I need to go back and kind of foreshadow it, or maybe I haven't got that going yet because it's in the future and hadn't been written yet, but I'll think maybe I need something about that is going to need to be done. Anyway, I think I do pretty good with the foreshadowing requirement. You know, yeah, anyway. So they get to work. She meets another, just, you know, the guard and all that, but we do get some comment about it being, you know, birthday gets, yeah, here. Gully's, we meet Gully. Now, Gully's another name I don't give a shit about. I think I knew someone with that name and I just used it because it popped into my head. But yeah, well, he's your typical bureaucrat thing. And now he's weak, but he gives her a task to do that he doesn't want to do, which is the execution. Obviously, now that we've managed to get Turgenev to the city and we got Harlow in the city and that, we know Harlow's there legitimately because he's on a mission. All right, so that brought him there. Now, maybe I explained it, maybe not, but why is he in Tara as opposed to anywhere else in the comedy empire that he could have gone and inserted the virus? Do you remember reading anything that suggested why he had to be in here to do it? I think I remember thinking about that, but that's probably like 10 years ago.
I don't remember if there was anything specific about Tara.
All right. I'm going to make sure that that's covered. because we do need to have a legitimate. We got Turgenev down and Tara under what I consider rather shaky ass stuff. Have we brought him down yet? Oh no, we haven't. Okay. We'll go on to the next chapter. I had the next chapter being suicide bombing.
It's just
All
chapter
right.
10.
What's that?
It's just chapter 10.
Does it start with 852 Anastasia Boudin?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's got
That's
a little
suicide.
quote in it too.
Yeah, do you recognize the band Fleetwood Mac?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so anyway, that phrase does fit with what's going on in the chapter. All right. I don't know. I like the chapter. And I think that I can't remember exactly. I think it struck me a rather tedious notion about remember before COVID, 5-10 years ago, there's a lot of suicide bombings going on with
Yeah.
ISIS and stuff like that, obviously. So I think I was impacted by that. And the whole thing, all right. You see where it starts at 8:52 a.m. and it's all, this chapter is all tied together with I don't know if it comes across, but it's tied together with the quotation from the Holy Bible called the New Testament book of Galatians, chapter 2, verse 20. All right. So basically, I think it was, maybe I mentioned it, Galatians 2:20. I could be wrong. It's been a while. But anyway, so that's why the thing goes off throughout the chapter. Like it goes 9 a.m., 9:01 a.m., 9:02 a.m., right? And then we get to the end and it says Galatians 2:20. So this is like the only chapter I have in a book where time is like that. I mean, maybe toward the end when we get it but all right. So what I'm trying to do here is she's on a countdown timer, a Schrodinger timer, which is a device I just made up. Big Bang Theory, Schrodinger's cat. You know what Schrodinger's cat means?
Yeah.
Basically. Okay. So what I created here was a Schrodinger's cat timer. In other words, and I think I explained it pretty well, but basically we don't know if it's going to go off or not. That is completely random. The cat is, we will find out if the cat is dead or alive by opening the box. And that's supposed to be some twisted expression of God's will. Okay. That's what's tied in here. There's this chapter also gives us a chance to see the police in action. Besides the initial chaos of the riot, now we have another chaotic incident that the police in a failing society, collapsing culture, have to deal with this kind of shit too, just like we do now. All right, so we have suicide bombings, we got, all right, so now the other slightly interesting concept was a Christian suicide bomber as opposed to a Mohammedan suicide bomber. Rather cheesy concept. I mean, I'm not proud of that part of it. Then later on, I've got it intimated. Again, if we bring it up to higher levels of that political economic level plot story, the Turgenev, the preacher who we haven't met yet, people like that. Basically, the reason the comedy tack was involved in chasing these people, blah, 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 is because they set this whole thing. It was a false flag operation. I think I explained that later on, but they were just manipulating. In other words, the government was manipulating this cluster of Christians into doing bad things because that furthered the government's goal of making religion illegal. All right.
Yes.
Which is exactly what happens today with BLM and stuff like that. They get used, Antifa, they get all they're basically kind of work, and you may not believe this, but I don't make these assertions without reams of data backing up. Anyway, they're all tied together with FBI, Stasi, false flag stuff, which I won't go into any detail because they don't have time to prove it. But yeah, it's stuff like that. So that's what's going on here. But you also have a person, all right, the name Anastasia Boudin, I like because at least the last name was a girl I met in my freshman year of college. I worked with her in the hospital kitchen, and I always liked her, and I liked her name, so I used it. Anyway, never seen her since. I got fired from that job. So what is that organization thing of the Galatians 2:20 suicide bombing thing? Is that apparent to the reader, the countdown? When I go from 9:02 to Galatians 2:20, does that make sense, or does it completely?
If someone was familiar with the Bible, most likely, as I'm not myself, so I wouldn't have picked up on it until you said something about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, did you identify with Anastasia Boudin's situation, or did you have any empathy for her? I mean, how does it work emotionally? Were you feeling like nervous like her? Or?
Yes. I tend to sympathize a lot with characters as I read, and with her, it was pretty easy for me to pick up on that anxious emotion.
Good. Well, I was trying to make her jittery and did it seem realistic as far as the process goes? About her body trembled, she found it hard to walk, even stand, her legs were so shaky. Yeah. Why hadn't she, I tried to make her very nervous. Anyway, I liked the chapter. I think personally it's one of my better offerings. I did find this, that she took comfort that, this is a quote from the book, when the Schrodinger's cat, she took comfort that her life or death at the time of Galatians 2:20 had been pre-designed for before the founding of the world. All right, so she's been manipulated into thinking that she is right. That anyway, that's why the bomb goes off at 9:02 or whatever, is because that's Galatians 2:20 somehow in her mind. And I have and there is a algorithm here. I just don't have time to figure out what that was again, but that countdown to Galatians 2:20 works. Trust me, that little point of it. So anyway, so we go into her mind, and she blows everything up around her for religious reasons, and then basically the cops come in response. And this gives another chance to show like flying, or flying ambulances landing. I think it would be a pretty cool movie scene.
Yeah.
All right, so I am in the next chapter, Time of the Dark. This is basically after Siska's time at the cenotaph, which got her to a certain point. At the end of this chapter, she's sunk. She's at the lowest frigging point she can be at, because what? Not only is Jezebel's gone, blah blah blah, but now what she truly believes in, being a cop, blah blah blah, is all threatened because of the behavior of the comedy tax here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And basically, here she is being blamed by an innocent, some innocent girl for murder. The cops are trying, all of a sudden this good cop, bad cop blame, it's just like if she wants to be a cop, and this is what being a cop is, you see what I mean? So I'm taking that away from her too. She's at the bottom of the bottle at this point. Now, I do bring up this girl again. She leads them through the city later on. But there's a lot of little. Anyway, the only reason I have that little girl Dora or whatever in the apartment was just to show the life there, and we never see. Now, remember Dora, and then we got this other, and sometimes the names, I don't even know what name it is anymore. But you do realize why they're all Dora, Isla, so why the names are all two syllable like that, short names.
They can be shortened into different names. Or like nicknames.
I did mention that the last time we talked, but it's also a cultural artifact of the book, of the world building of the book, is that for some period of time, and like when Siska was born, all the parents were naming their kids with two syllable names. It was a thing that now is no longer true. Anyway, I think I mentioned that somewhere in passing.
I think so.
It may not have even come up yet, but that's why that's there. There's just like the calendar change, there was, okay, well, let me give you an example. Everything's racist now, right? So you hear, and I keep track of all this stuff, but it's quite, they'll say, Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, says that there's the streets, the road layout is in America is racist, etc. So everything, in other words, under that context, I don't know why I'm bringing it up. Never mind. Okay. I had a reason, and it probably will pop up again, but ain't making any sense. I'm pretty good in this chapter with the response of the cops. I like how Kilver, again, just like he was at the initial chapter in charge, he was settle. He was the guy saying settle, pedal, calm down. You know what I mean? And here he is. He's a natural leader. And at the time of the suicide bombing, now they're not looking at Gully. Gully doesn't even want anything to, Gully looked relieved, it says, because Kilver just took over. And that always happens. Anyway, so I like the chapter, basically, the response. I like the fact that the girl was found with just like still standing, but just like her legs, not the, some kind of weird, like that frozen in salt story in the Bible only is just the bottom half. Anyway, stuff like that. So it's pretty cool as far as horror goes. So this is and again, near the start of the book, we have a second horrible thing happen and horrible description with Broken Arrow and now Time of the Dark. We have bad. I mean, you could say it's a horror novel. And if that is a legitimate critique, I can let's just say that when I'm writing it and I know it's going to get edited, I make it weighty, and then I realize I can take stuff out, without changing too much. Okay. Do you have any thoughts on this comment on this chapter, All Time of the Dark? Otherwise we can move on.
As for like the gory stuff, the more that you have it in there, the more intentional it seems. So having this chapter compared to the previous one with Broken Arrow does make it seem a little more deliberate for the two chapters. Having these
now we're going to get to an execution.
True. So having these instances, it does make it seem more intentional for the situations that they're in. If that makes sense.
Well, my mom wants to read this book. And I don't mind, but she's a pastor's wife. My dad was a Lutheran pastor, and I'm just gonna tell her it starts. Look, it's all gonna work out in the end. And these are bad people doing bad things, but it'll turn out okay. I promise you. For all the bad things, like this horror shit, there's going to be beautiful things too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anyway. All right. Now it's time for what I call retrospective 1. In the book, I'm imagining these things would be like in a different font or set off somehow, maybe different, like in italics or something, you know what I mean? But they're definitely not. They do interrupt the flow of the story because they're, again, background information, but a whole new, anyway. Now, I would say that maybe about sometime after this, I started writing, Siska, a story about a cop trying to trace or hunt down a terrorist in Australia. But now we got Dirk de Freitas. Something occurred where I go, hey, we are going to have this AGI character named Snowden, which we're going to meet here soon. But he had to be invented. I think this all popped in my head. This whole, I thought, first of all, Dirk de Freitas, I may have told you that story the other day. He died right after high school.
Yeah.
That guy. Sorry, I knew I wanted a name. But I think, and then I kind of knew he was going to survive a nuclear bomb in Belgium or something like that. But the rest of it just rolled off really well. Probably wrote all this real quick. It's short. All right. Offhand, what do you think about the retrospective idea to bring up? Basically, we got the story starting in Australia, or from your, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then now we're interrupting, hey, because of something, this new character's coming in. This is and it's going to be inner stages of these retrospectives that are all, and then those plot lines now at the book 3 is when they're coming together. At near the very start of book 3, Siska and Harlow are going to meet Dirk.
I think it's good to have this little secondary plot line, especially with them meeting in the front or in the beginning of book 3. That way it's not just, hey, here's this new character
Yeah.
introduced so late into the series.
Yeah, and you could think, the story could have started off with Dirk de Freitas making an AGI and working for the Texan. You got, that you could have this, you could have a whole cool story going on there, and then get to where we're at here with Harlow and Siska in book 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something like that. But I chose to just make the story about what's going on in Siska and Harlow life, and then this is some background information for it. Anyway, everything about it is extremely well researched with Google Maps, Google Earth, Wikipedia, and so on and so forth. So Le Berlaymont, the third floor of Le Berlaymont or whatever, that all makes sense if you look into a map of the European Union headquarters and stuff. Okay. And the city fire and the maps. And believe me, even if I say, I'll mention that later. Anyway, so I did the information about the bomb and the big Tsar Bomba. That name was used on TV about a month ago. They were going because of the Russia Ukrainian thing. But anyway, the Tsar Bomba was the biggest bomb ever invented. And I don't think it ever was used. All right, so Dirk and his mom, I like this line. So at the time the bomb went off, Dirk and his mother were living in a third floor apartment of an ugly red brick building on Rue Saint Bernard. Again, Google Maps. So I knew there's a street called Saint Bernard, and there's an ugly red building on it. You can go right to it. Anyway. And it has, guess what? A third floor apartment with a rail. So I look at that and I go, oh, they got to get out on that rail. So that's what they stepped out onto the tiny porch. Dirk later remembered his mom, and this is a good line, I think. Dirk later remembered his mom's slim hand tapping nervously on the black iron rail. I just like that line. It's just those little, huh?
I said, yeah.
Yeah. So then he goes home. They tried to escape this is, I'm using descriptions of the fire bombing in World War II of that German city, Dresden. The fire bombing of Dresden. I read some descriptions of that. So when I go along here about how thick wall of black smoke, bits of flaming debris raining down, an unquenchable thirst for water. The air he breathed was harsh and tasted strange. A dusty wind rose up, the living orange monster demanding ever more. Anyway, I think that's a pretty good description. All right, Dirk would have died in a fire if he had not been rescued by a volunteer named Paul de Lebreton. All right, there really was a guy named Paul de Lebreton, a friend of my parents when I was a little kid, and I always liked his name. So again, in my habit of using people I respected in real life as character names, there you go. So then I just made up this shit somehow of something I bumped into about Dirk had never met his father, didn't know his real name. His mother had often told him his father, the great love of her life, was an itinerant Madeiran machete de rajeo performer. I don't remember what that was. If you do look that up, you'll find out it's I don't, maybe an accordion or something. But yeah, there is actually some kind of thing like that. Anyway, just a little, I sometimes just like to make up these crazy little factoid things where I bump into them and I just throw them in here like that. Do we need to know anything about Dirk's dad? No.
Not really.
So we just mentioned this shit. Again, the whole paragraph can be eliminated if a professional editor finds it useful. Then we can skip ahead. We have Sis get the execution. Again, I toned it down actually in the actual execution that I had planned, that he was going to be ground from the feet up, like crushed grinding gears that would go up the body, right? And then the final thing would be the neck, and then the head would go popping up into the air about 10 feet, and then with blood, arcing and then clap. I kind of cut that part out and tried to let it be a little bit more civil. And another confusing thing is Baxter's his name, I think. And she's looking at a picture of him. This happens to be in the file that she printed out or something like that. And she's ruminating about the fact, basically this guy does not deserve to die for this crime. But again, government problems.
Yeah.
Then we get later on when Turgenev and his agents are looking for her, they go to her apartment and they find this picture and he analyzes it. Do you remember that part? Sitting in a, yeah. And the whole thing is that whole part, the thing about the backstory of Baxter and that photograph and all that can be taken out. It's just sort of like I was originally, and I'm trying to write, what we're doing here is trying to maybe help someone in the future know what it's like to write a book and the decisions you have to make. Well, I put Baxter's backstory, that little picture in it, and I got Siska leaving it behind when she leaves her apartment for good. I got Turgenev finding it, thinking it's evidence of some kind, and then basically poof, nothing more than that. I mean, I could, and there's elements about the Baxter picture, the Adirondack chairs, and I like the description. I mean, but I don't think it helps too much to leave that. I might go in and take that whole Baxter. I might, yeah, she'd still go to an execution, but I wouldn't have her worrying too much about Baxter, and I wouldn't have his picture for Turgenev to find. I don't see where that's going anywhere. Maybe it will. I right off the bat, top of my head, I can't think of any value in that except to get word count up, which is why I was doing this for data. Right? More word.
I think having her care as much about Baxter as she did, that's part of what led me to thinking that it's just the government that she's rebelling against and not the loss of everything. But I think it's benefiting having her that connected, because it shows us just one more thing that she loses. It shows us that sense in right and wrong in the government and how it's going negative for her, if that makes sense. Like where she had this unshakable faith, knowing this execution and knowing that this man doesn't deserve to die for this kind of thing, just kind of lowers that faith and gives her another loss.
All right. Yes, and that's probably all true. What did you think the execution in general was? Again, horror. That I was trying to make it into a ritualized style, and also entered, you could, in the death throes of empires that we're undergoing right now.
Yeah.
Bread and circuses become a major. You've heard about the Romans, right? As the elite were wait, playing the violin while fiddling while Rome was burning. They got the bread and circuses going on with the gladiators, just immoral sports, right?
Mm.
That's the way this is. Executions is sort of
Yeah.
like the bread and circuses of this crowd, yeah. Anyway,
And that's the way it's framed too. It does kind of give that, while Siska might be questioning the government due to this, the rest of the community is more like, yeah, this is what should be going on. This is entertainment and not some guy's life.
hey, did it seem all right? Now, I could have had her looking for Harlow for days or months even, but she gets tasked with him and bumps into him right away. I mean, wow.
Happenstance.
I'm kind of concerned that it was too easy, but also I think we're just to delay it anymore. Well, okay.
For the pacing of the book, it works really well, in my opinion.
You weren't offended by it or thinking like, what the fuck?
I mean, it was a what the fuck moment, but it was a good what the fuck moment. Like, you're learning about this guy, and then here he is all of a sudden. Drama.
Yeah, and I will accept that. I guess I'm uncomfortable, generally speaking, with dissatisfied with how Turgenev got to Tara, but through some elaborate, complex machinery. I have a mental blank because I can never remember the name of those things. Anyway, those cat mousetrap game.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think
they're
it's just
named after the Ruby Goldberg device.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
I always have a mental blank. I can never come up with the word Ruby Goldberg when I want to. I have to. Anyway, it's interesting. And I got other ones like that too. At any rate, yeah, but you know what? I'm sure every author, when they're trying or with plots and trying to get characters to meet and all that, they're sitting there going like, God dang it. I don't know. And maybe but basically it all with Turgenev coming to Earth, which we haven't even talked about yet. So I shouldn't even talk about it right now. All right. Same here. I could have had an elaborate detective looking, and lead, I do a little bit of that later on when I have Kilver and her going over some some data software and all that, trying to find him, right?
Yeah.
And they use some kind of computer software. It's the same shit that we do with that I'm gonna start learning how to do with photogrammetry in a drone. Try to take a bunch of pictures, keeping track of their GPS coordinates and elevation and direction of the cameras. And they take all that data of every photo, thousands of photos, literally, of an object as the drone is swarming around. And then they put it into a computer program and it crunches the data together and then makes a 3D model. It's beautiful, but my laptop wouldn't be powerful enough to do it. You have to load this data up to the cloud anywhere and paste that. Anyway, it's pretty cool though. But that's what, and here's what, I was imagining they were doing, 5 years ago before I'd even heard this. So yeah, I got some sci-fi in me. All right. So, anyway, so yeah, she sees him right off the bat at the back of the crowd, but it fits. He doesn't like what's going on. He just driving a city. He's walking past, sees this, and he doesn't like it, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so maybe it's too simple and all that. If I, and I think, and you seem to be okay with it.
Mhm.
Next. So the next one is she's chasing him. There's not a lot to say in this chapter at all, except I wish I did have a city map so I could be correct with where the concourse, and I do have to sit down all these days and do that, make sure that all of the directions and all that are okay. But she's looking up and down. At least she didn't catch him right away. She saw him right away, but didn't catch him right away. All right. That makes things a little bit better. So then she gives up looking for him but does have, but there's some data now. She's, oh, I guess I'm getting more okay with it. Yeah. So she only saw him, but now she does have to do some actual detective work to actually get him, including the SWAT raid, which is coming up. So yeah, things aren't too easy. Okay. Now let's see, because over the years, the character description of Harlow Turk changed dramatically. At first, I had him as that guy. He's in the Marvel movies. He plays Aquaman or something like that.
Jason.
Kind of must. Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
Jason Momoa, I think's his name. And he was originally on Stargate Atlantis, was his first show. And that's one of the best science fiction series ever made. I mean, I'm a big fan of Stargate anyway. Anyway, I hate saying it because I'm a Star Trek guy, but I hate Star Trek now, except for the original series. But Stargate is amazing. Good. Have you ever watched Stargate?
Yes.
Like SG-1?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Did you like it?
Yes.
Did you ever hear about Stargate Atlantis or Stargate Universe or the Stargate movies?
I think I'd seen Stargate Atlantis as well.
Yeah, that's my favorite, man. They do some. Anyway, I love character interaction. And when they on Stargate and in Stargate Atlantis, they had Rodney. You remember him? He was the computer genius guy.
Yeah.
And he had in Stargate Atlantis, he ends up falling in love, or the female doctor falls in love with him, and it's just wonderful, man. And we meet Rodney's sister, and that episode of Rodney and his sister is one of my favorite episodes in all of TV. It's just, oh. Plus, occasionally, in Stargate SG-1 in particular, you would occasionally get some amazingly awesome science fiction ideas, concepts that just were mind-blowing stuff. I mean, very rare, even there, but man, they could come up with some good stuff. Anyway. So Harlow Turk was originally looking something like a Jason Momoa, kind of dark, or Conan, kind of strong, muscular, long, and he had tattoos. He was just wrapped in tattoos, like his whole body. Ray Bradbury wrote a book once back in the 50s called The Illustrated Man.
Yes.
And I've got that actually. Hold on.
What was it?
Here.
Mm-hmm.
This was the cover this was the book when I was in grade school that when this came out, and it just I just loved the artwork and the cover. So later on, when I was out looking for a signed first edition of this is signed by Ray Bradbury and all that, probably worth $20. Big deal. This was the first science fiction book I ever read. This isn't the same copy, but I went out and bought it later on. The Green Hills of Earth collection of Heinlein short stories. Got it in a week. When I was in school, we'd get this weekly reader come out on Fridays, and the teachers would have us sit at our desk and read. It's like a little newspaper. And then about once a month or so, it would have an order form where you could order books. And then they'd deliver them to the school. And I'd read like a million Scholastic books.
Yep. I remember doing that in elementary.
Yeah. 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 They still do it.
Yeah.
I think my grandkids are gonna do it. Anyway, it's a good thing. So so it looks like Jason Momoa. Here's what it says. He had green eyes which radiate from his face, full lips, broad cheekbones, Caucasian. I'm using cop speak, like the way a cop would describe somebody. Not. He was tall. I use meters, quite muscular, covered with intricate body ink. Another thing that had gone out of style decades ago. Real ink, not the flesh embedded LCD artwork kids were wearing today. There was lots of scars and signs, bullets. And any comment on Harlow?
I liked the way he was described and like the introduction that we get to him through all this with searching for him and him eluding them.
All right, next. The next line says, he did not impress her as a traitor at all, more like Carlton Crew. So Carlton Crew, that again is a Australian criminal gang sort of thing that perhaps an Australian reader might recognize, but no one else would.
Yeah, I didn't recognize it.
No. I, in fact, probably could switch that. What would be a pretty good idea there is switch that to 10K or whatever that is, that 14K, is it? That Chinese Kong Zintian in the last book, he is part of a criminal gang. Like I could say he looks more like, no, I can't because he ain't Asian. Yeah, okay. Never mind. All right. So yeah, well, the ink stuff, for some reason, and I think this came from, like I said, pieces that I put together. So he's tan, got all these, he's ex-special forces, ex-high school wrestler, I think. Yeah. And yeah, I got to check it out. Yeah. No, he was a football quarterback. Anyway, the Texan had his sports background before he, went in the Army, and then this guy Harlow has a sports background in high school. I want to make sure that I'm not confused, but it doesn't matter too much anyway. Just the fact that I had a wrestling background is the only reason it's like that. All right, so we already talked about this. Anyway, the tattoo thing was a problem for me, but I realized it's not really a problem because I can do whatever I want to with those tattoos. The original concept, I think that I have him tell Siska later on, maybe.
Yes.
That the children's faces and whatever represented people he had killed or something like that. But I
believe that's what it was.
Yeah. But here's the other thing: if you are a hitman kind of guy, who's sent to communities to do missions, you can't be covered in tattoo ink. You'd be on every police, be on the lookout for. You don't blend into a crowd if you're wrapped in you know what I mean? James Bond wouldn't be wrapped in tattoos, so whenever you landed in an airport, everyone would go, "Oh,
Recognize you.
there's James Bond, that spy that's covered in tattoos." Yeah. So yeah, I think I'm gonna get rid of those. But what do you think?
I don't know. I liked having the symbolism behind him because the story that he does tell Siska, it does help him. I don't know if convince her is the right way to put it, but having that imagery along with the story he's telling does seem to move her in a way that it might not have if he didn't.
Okay. I see you're seeing things that I wouldn't have noticed. All right, we'll leave it in there for now. It's minor anyway. Yeah, that's the thing. When you're writing, you do stuff for one reason, and maybe it has an impact for a reason you don't even know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't need to go into a lot of detail here because it's just basically they're going through. She gets Kilver involved in helping her do what Gully told her to do, find Harlow. She's seen him. Now they have some data that they can use their tools as police tools. And actually, we know they get them in the next chapter, the stack raid. All right. I spent a lot of time researching SWAT team raids and stuff like that. And because I knew about it. And my son was trained to do that kind of shit. And we've seen him on TV. Now, the only funny thing here, I was imagining that we're going to set this all up for a big confrontation between this, Harlow and whatever gimmicks he might have on his snowcat to defend himself with and all that versus the SWAT team. You know what I mean? It's all set up for a big clash, and then he just steps out of the thing to give himself up, and he gets knocked out. I mean, illegally, so to speak. Now, what do you think of the whole SWAT team chapter?
It's another good view into the police procedurals, but I think, like you said, with him just stepping out like that, I don't know if all of the prep was necessary. Like, it could be cut in half with like her giving the speech, and then all of a sudden he's stepping out and giving in, not drawing it out a little more.
Yeah. Careful choreography is required to maximize safety through the fatal funnel of the doorway when they were and we go into all this shit, and then when actually it does happen, he's just like, donk. Now the whole point, I've got to have these two characters meet. All right, she's got to arrest them. The original concept was that she went ahead somehow, I can't remember, but she arrests him, and I think the initial meeting I have between the two of them is that he's in lockup in jail, and she's interrogating him, that kind of a thing. Similar to what we see happen when she's in the hospital room and they do that interrogating thing for the recording. Well, and I don't know. Basically, the way it ended up working out is that instead of her somehow arresting him or meeting him for the first time in the jail, doing a jail police interrogation routine, which you've seen a million times, and instead, after all this build up for the big SWAT thing, this is her first time she's in charge, but it just fucks up It's a fuck up. And she didn't fuck it up. But again, we have those bad cops, you know, the profession she's questioning, you know, again, another brick in the wall, so to speak. But I think the whole thing was that, again, it was a complex stepped arrangement of seeing him in the crowd, doing some police investigation, getting him. Now he's in the hospital, which gives me the perfect chance for me to figure out a way to get her to the hospital and talk to him, right? I need a chance to have a long private conversation at this, maybe.
Yeah.
All right. So I admit it's kind of, I don't know if I'm really maybe there's a better way to do it. And if you can think of it, let me know. But basically, the goal is to get them together. I did have it originally where they met in a police cell, but you know, this is better to have them in the hospital, and then it starts moving quickly after. I mean, okay. All right, so I'm done with that chapter. Now we go on a retrospective 2, and we're back with Dirk, and here he is.
You froze again.
Yeah, this thing just stopped and then rebooted and log. I didn't even touch. Is it there for you?
Yeah, it's there for me now. You were just frozen on my end.
Yeah. I got to do that live transcription thing. And so I think it's live. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. It says live transcription is. I'm going to disable it, then I'm going to enable it again. All right. Yeah, it's working good. Hopefully. All right. So where were we? All right, we're back in retrospective 2 with Dirk. And yeah, so basically in my life, but when I got done with college and went to grad school at University of Illinois to major in sociology for some reason. It didn't matter because theoretically, the plan was, I think originally I was majoring, I don't know what the fuck. Anyway, my teacher was Martin Jekyll. My advisor at that school is Martin. So that's why that name is there. I have tried to find him ever since. Even as a grad student, I was teaching him a class. It was an interesting thing. I taught him a class. Then I only was there for like a year. I got halfway through a master's in sociology. Then I got that phone call to go to law school and went there and bombed out and joined the army. Met my wife. Yeah, so that's a good thing. Anyway, so we got all right. all of that, I won't go into a lot of detail, but trust me, all of that stuff about in French words like baccalaureate, scientifique, école normale supérieure, I don't know French, concours, all that stuff I did a lot of research on. So that's the way it is with the French school system. Basically, he, after being rescued from the Brussels fire by Paul de Lebreton, he has been going to school. He's doing really well. In fact, he's remarkable at an early age, like you'd expect from a super genius. So, yeah, Paul called out to the widow Boudreaux, "Look, Dirk is here." Then we meet Eloise. She rubbed her hands on her apron, smiled, and waved happily back. Typical description of a French mom. And Eloise, it's Dirk, right? So a few moments later, shy, pretty girl that everyone but Dirk knew was secretly in love with him. All right. So like any other teenager, he's oblivious. So we do find that they grow together over the years, right? And Paul is growing old and all that. So then I've got this bullshit where, and this was really cool. I actually was on Google Earth or Google Maps at that school, the Cour au Ernest in the Rue Dome quadrangle. He was sitting at a rather ordinary picnic table, which seemed out of place among the ornate gardens. That's because I'm using Street View or what, I'm looking at the campus of this French university for, there's a quadrangle, here's the, you know what I mean? And that's the setting for the scene. So I just describe what Google Maps is showing me, presuming it remains about the same for another 25 years, right? So as a footnote, I really encourage writers to get Google Maps out and use it to set scenes. Maybe you don't care if you get the street name exactly right like I do, but at least, hey, and I'll tell you, and I'll mention it again in a little bit, but so then Paul, his dad, his adoptive dad or whatever, tells him that Eloise loves him. He's like, what? So Paul was surprised at how many people attended his pair's funeral. All right. At the end of this chapter, this vignette where I'm just setting up, okay, we see Paul again, Paul de Lebreton, Dirk again. Paul's dead. He's in love with Eloise. Here they are together. Now, this character we are going to meet, I mean, we do have a story going on about him, but he will meet the other character soon, which might help things. But one of my trademarked methods of making the reader identify with the character, even a minor, but Dirk ain't so minor, but to identify the character, what I find I do is do something like how they fell in love. In this case, we have a story about how Dirk and Eloise, right? They go, Eloise leaned forward and hugged him. Dirk's arms found themselves wrapped around her. And I can't use that word twice. He found comfort. I can't say that. Dirk's arms found themselves wrapped around her, and he found comfort that they permitted him to cry, that comfort that permitted him to cry over the loss of Paul. You can't use the word found there twice. I'll fix that someday. All right. Anyway, or maybe it's not even in your document. But... All right. So anyway, you're going to see this technique. Maybe you can remember. I do it about 3 times in this book. Here we have Dirk and Eloise with their romantic story background, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the future, you're going to see Kilver. Well, we're going to have Kilver telling about Becca and him on their first date. Remember that?
Yes.
And then they worked together, and then he bought a bottle of wine over he found underneath his kitchen cabinet, and we're sitting down watching Donnie Darko, right? Then I think there's a third example of somebody in the story telling a romantic thing like their wedding day. I mean, there's 3 of these or so, but okay. Number 1. All of these romance vignettes, like here it goes. Later, on the eve of a picnic, boy, I can't say that. I got to change that too. The night when he proposed marriage to her, Eloise softly sang to him in English, because she's French or Belgium or whatever, an old American song. Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars on Jupiter and Mars. And Dirk, who couldn't sing at all, forced his low voice to join with hers as she led him through the lyrics. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, baby, kiss me. Are you familiar with that song?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Frank Sinatra?
Yeah, I've heard of him, but I haven't listened to a lot of him.
Right. I don't blame you. And when I'm asking this, I'm not putting you down. I'm just trying to see how far. Yes, this is the key song by Frank Sinatra that everybody knows, my age or whatever. You've heard the song, and I can't sing, otherwise I would
Most
do it.
likely heard it. It's just not.
Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. That kind of thing. It's one of those kind of 50s songs. Anyway, very famous. So they sing this song together, and then the imagined melody faded away with their breath becoming more coarse and heavy. They held each other tightly while their hands and lips and teeth and breath explored. And I use that phrase a lot too, and probably elsewhere in the book, which I had to fix. Wandered over necks and ears, backs and arms, and something. So that anyway. Now, so like I said, the big thing here is that a technique that I find myself employing too much is that whenever I have a character I want to, let's say, introduce the reader to, I will elaborate to help that reader identify emotionally, identify with. Perhaps they're remembering their own romantic days when they met their girl, whatever, that kind of an association. It's an important event in the character's life. It's not a trivial one. There's that. They're different. This was, and I think in this case, it's how they fell in love. And in another case, it's like maybe the first date. Another time it's, they're not all the same thing 3 different times. One thing they all have in common, though, which is typical, is the male character is always the bumbling, he's not leading. He's the woman it's that stereotypical English male who's nice, everyman sort of guy, but he's got manners, and he's not going to push the envelope, and really, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the women immediately wrap themselves, you know. Look at, I think this is what I'm telling you about is most pronounced later on, but something you've read recently, which is that I think Kilver talking about the Donnie Darko date and bringing the bottle of wine. You know, everything was wrong, right? He didn't say the right thing at the right time. He's second guessing himself. You know what I mean? From one end of the date to the other, even when they're sitting in front of the TV touching, you know, he's still saying, you know, stupid things and acting like a, and, you know, and the woman is always in control and like lead, you know, like taking the hand, making the movement, the motion, you know. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Have you noticed that pattern in this
Yeah, I've
book or
noticed
her
it.
book? Yeah, anyway. I like, you know, and I got to admit, I like that English everyman kind of guy. I am one, baby. But you know, I like that. And anyway, it's just probably something that can't change. I'm just gonna always do it. But I enjoy it. The other thing I want to say is this thing about singing the Frank Sinatra song and taking a hand and that thing, Kilver's thing of the first bumbling date with Donnie Darko TV, you know, and all that. And then whatever the other one was, which we'll bump into, those three stories had nothing to do with this book. They were something I had in my writer's notebook, so to speak, that I thought, oh, you know, that'll work here. I'll use that to stick in here to do this, you know, that kind of thing. So I drag it over and I change names and whatever it takes to get it to work. Probably 25% of this book is stolen from stuff and just tucked in here because it was appropriate. All right. Next chapter. Oh, before we go on, at the very bottom, he says, I love your heart, I love your soul, and I love your mind. And she goes, don't forget my body. You have to love my body. You see what I mean? This is the girl is the one who says that. One thing I want to check real quick. Make sure that sentence isn't used with the Kilver background story like that, because it could be I do. Yeah. Anyway, so we'll leave that. So we go back to, since it's sort of a police story, we're back I think in the next chapter where Kilver and Siska are working on the suicide bomber case. They got some information there and they're going over that. And then it ends with religion. That's why it's illegal. Anyway, just just some stuff. I think it's useful to have this stuff here. Remember, Kilver's their boss, and they're gonna have a big meeting in the future. All right, finally, the next chapter I got here is Turgenev coming back to Earth. He's sitting in his cramped office up in the space station now, and he gets a video phone call from his boss, Vauclane. All right. The name Vauclane, I think I like it. I like Vauclane. It sounds tough, you know, like. And that's probably why I use it. But then I gave him funny first name, Tremblay, for some reason. I don't remember why. But anyway, so and he's pointing, and this is basically the presentation of a number of facts that is going to ultimately bring Turgenev to Tara Bulga. So this is where I finally am getting the ratchet applied to kind of get him down there. So as you recall, Anungu 7 had not only noticed a spy satellite disappeared, but then itself disappeared.
Yeah.
Then when Turgenev really tried to get rid of the evidence of his scientific experiment by ejecting one of the workstation bays from the space day, that disappeared too. It got intercept, right? So that we all know that. I mean, that hadn't happened yet, but it's gonna. And so these are all reasons he's got to assemble in his head, but basically it ends up being just grabbing it out of his ass, kind of going on a whim or instinct or whatever to get him to Tara Bulga. But we'll talk about that a little more later on. So Turgenev's he gets the phone call. Now, there's a certain personality characteristic that his boss has about the pauses. You'll see, and when I wrote this was just sort of like a experimental writing thing where I wanted to put this, like I have in here, he's commenting about the speech habit or whatever that his boss has. It irritates the fuck out of him with these pauses. In the first one, I think maybe I've eliminated them or reduced them in the copy you have, where it goes pause, pause, pause. Does it say that at all?
No, I don't think it has the pauses in it.
Yeah. But originally I had pause, pause, like ridiculous. Pause, like brackets, pause. And there may be some in there, but
I found where it is. It does have the pause over and over again.
Yeah, it may not work. It was sort of just like a conceit I threw out there I wanted to do. All those, I can completely get rid of the whole issue about his boss's speech habit of putting pauses in and just get rid of the whole concept. And I may, but I'm just explaining that's why it's there. Did it bother you? Did it make sense?
I kind of got irritated, like what I imagined Turgenev did, but it didn't like to pull me away from the story at all.
Yeah, to me it was sort of a interesting kind of a playground thing to play around with one character commenting about another's speech habits and illustrating that, and maybe the reader can understand, kind of go along with that, and that would really be fucking anyway. But I think it probably is useless or does more damage, or you know what I mean, more harm than good. Anyway, so basically he's literally put under the gun. Like always, he pulls out a cigarette. Now, one of the characteristics, whenever you have a character, in my opinion, whenever you have a character in a story, they have to have a bundle of things that belong to them: behaviors, words, phrase, whatever. Okay? Because by giving that character like something to do, something to have, blah blah blah, we're able to go in those directions to add weight to what we're saying. All right. Now, if what some authors do, they'll go, the protagonist, Siska Tatum, She's a lot like Gwen Cooper or whatever her name was from, I can never,
Torchwood.
Torchwood. That's another mental block I have. Torchwood. And Voclaim, or and then they'll go on. They might make a. Have you ever done this in your stories? You know, you make a page, like a bio page for your character, like this is the kind of food they like. They really into pizza, or really into Chinese food, or loves the Beatles.
Yes,
Or
but I've never put it into a story.
yeah, but a lot of authors will sit down and make like, this is the character, this is what he likes, hates, he went to this school, you know, you get a whole back, you know, and all that crap. And that's kind of my approach. I don't write it on, you know, I don't have a bio. I do have, but I don't think of the stuff all before I write the story. You know, I might just start off with a name I like and say, oh yeah, he's a cop. But then at some point, you have to make them in that character into a person that the reader can identify with. You hope they want to cheerlead for the character. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have to make them more three-dimensional, I guess. And so one of the ways I make the character three-dimensional in this case is the cigarette. So Turgenev is oddly smoking. What? They still smoke cigarettes 25 years from now? I thought the last butt would have been rubbed out in the year 2032. Whatever. You get the idea. So anyway, they're still doing those outrageous smoking things. All right, so now he's going over the along with the reader, discussing what you know. Okay, so he just goes through that. Fact: surveillance satellite was you know, fact: the loss of 2 satellites, certainly not coincidence. Fact: the surveillance satellite Australia. Fact: a confidential. Okay, so here's where. All right. A confidential informant's report, a contact buried deep within the terrorist group LS, an active cell in Southern Australia on the verge of some great success. Now, that one statement is purposely meant to link a bunch of stuff that's coming up. This is the first I think we've heard of it. Now, you've read the story, so you know in the future we're going to have Turgenev meeting with Hobbes. Then he goes off and finds somebody and kills them with those 12 gauge shotgun shells that are super glued to their foreheads.
Yeah.
Sort of. So basically, if you remember in that discussion, which we haven't gotten to yet, but that guy is saying like, yeah, my daughter was in something with Melbourne Cell and I was trying to help her and I was pretended I was gay and tried to manipulate Hobbes, and you know what I mean? Just some kind of weird shit. And he's trying to explain it, and Turgenev just pushes a trigger and it says, you know, fuck you, you don't make it, this isn't making it, because that's exactly right. The whole but I have Turgenev tell the guy that your story is bullshit and kills him. That's because I'm saying I have no idea what to do except kill. All right, so I guess I'm saying that yeah, I was getting Turgenev to Earth, I think is not really well plotted. I think I wish I could come up with a more smooth way to get into Tarabulga. instead of just saying, well, I got missing satellite, some relationship with Australia, and then there was this new thing, this deeply embedded spy saying that, you know what I mean? And all right, and then he just flat out says, critique sufficient to date items that could have nothing to do with each other or could. All he had was a suspicion. Turgenev's intuition was that the loss of the satellite may be related to some intel from a deep cover source. Thus go to Tara. Now it does work. It gets them to the city, it gets them to the scene of the crime, and it gets them to kill some people and take over the town. I like how that goes. Now you read it. Did it defend you, like your logic, or did you notice any flow or anything like, well, this was dumb? Or
I didn't notice any flow errors with it. I thought it flowed fine.
no one, the other two people who've read it have never said any, but I haven't really picked at it, with them either. I guess maybe I don't, if someone could ever think of a more natural way or better way to do it, but it does work. I mean, it ends up being okay, but and I'm wondering how many other books I've read by Alistair Reynolds or Peter F. Hamilton or J.R.R. Tolkien or whatever, where he's going like, God dang, this is the crappiest way that here we are at the Falls of Rhoros or whatever, and the fellowship is breaking up, and and Bilbo and Frodo and Sam are running off this way on a, and this guy's dead, Aragorn's brother or whatever. Anyway, you know what I mean? If those authors are struggling to do shit too, it's like they go like, God, I hope I got that. All right, I'll tell you, there are some books I've read where I'm going like, what? Like the rather weak way Tolkien does things. It's always an eagle that swarm that ends, the Battle of the Five Armies in The Hobbit, or the eagle carries Frodo back after he drops the ring off at Mount Doom, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, kind of weak, I think. But you'll see where the author is just like me, doing this, grabbing something out of his butt, trying to make it work, I guess. So yeah, at the end of that, so he flies back again. The technical stuff about the spacecraft, the shuttle coming down, I've done research on and projected it, and so that all makes sense from a scientific point of view. I go back into, remember now, Turgenev is a psychopath. He's brilliant, and we do get some background, being that he's alone in a flight cabin, which is very similar to the scene in 2001, A Space Odyssey film by Stanley Kubrick, when they send the guy up and he goes on the space shuttle. Did you ever see that movie?
Yes.
Near the start when the guy goes with the stewardess and the stewardess goes upside down carrying his drink. And that's what that was all influential in this flight cabin thing. I think all right, so we get into some of Turgenev's backstory, and I don't know if I still have Mama Honey in there, I'm going to get rid of that, because he's talking about like he has 3 wives, or he's the kind of guy who has a woman at every port, so to speak. So when he had been recalled from his post to Kazakhstan, he found himself driven to study the abandoned legacy. His comedy intelligentsia had identified anti-TQ1 intellectual thought. So what's really fascinating here is that this next section is about books. And here I am just flat out telling you, I want the reader who's reading this story when they get into this section, I want, because this is stuff I've done, but when he describes holding the book in his hand and the smell of leather and stuff like that, I'm definitely wanting the reader to identify with that. No, like, yeah, I recall the scent of book leather in the morning, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So he's basically, the intellectual concept here is that he had to get special permission to go and look at what, history, the document history of the human race, because that was being hidden from people by the comedy empire. Just like they're reinventing history now with Project 1619 or whatever it's called, and so on and so forth. They're very uncomfortable with history, so they're rewriting it, ignoring it, teaching different, you know what I mean? This is what cultures do, ban books. And so despite that, because he's a connected part of the intelligentsia, he's able to get these books that are banned, and he has them shipped to his mansion, and he's found himself really enjoying it. So again, I could leave some of this exposition out, but I just love it. Look, to his surprise, he quickly became quite fond of books. Now remember, he's probably in a year when it's all ebooks and video.
Yeah.
He cherished them. He ran his fingers over their leather covers, appreciated their hefty weight and bulk, inhaled the smell of their dry leather and dusty pages, marveled at the incessant march of ink across their fragile pages. I mean, this is good writing, I think. Then, but basically, like I said, I'm trying to get the reader to identify with it. And then I'm trying to set up some historical, cultural context. He spent months engrossed in history, religion, and philosophy. His journey began in antiquity. Don't all journeys begin in antiquity? Mesopotamian empire, civilization scattered along the shores of the Mediterranean. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. And then he comments on the late our time, Jim. He says he was especially intrigued with the cultural milieu of the late 20th century West. There had been nothing quite like it. Decadent, chaotic, unbelievably self-absorbed and short. Anyway, that's describing our time.
Yes.
I want the reader to kind of chuckle. So then they get diverted. Then he gives it, I can do a little one thing I like to do in science fiction stuff is go into topics of philosophy and controversial stuff. And originally that's what science fiction was supposed to do, is take some aspect of society or technology or something and extrapolate. Well, what would it be like if everybody lived forever? What would it be like if everyone had a robot friend? And then you write a story about it, right? So that's science fiction. But he goes into religion and he talks in he met a Christian once, a prisoner who wanted to die for his belief. And so they roasted him. Again, horror. But I'm trying to, I guess what's happening in this chapter with Turgenev is psychotic, brilliant, loves books. Do psychotic sociopaths love books and history? So you're getting all this conflict of stuff, and this intellectual, brilliant man is roasting Christians alive. You know what I mean? So you're getting all this opposites just banging against each other here. At least that is my intention. And you're learning more about the character. You'll know basically he'll stop at nothing, and he's not stupid by any means. All right, next off. All right, we've done this for just about 2 hours. Are you able to continue on anymore?
Yeah, I'm good to continue on if we need to.
All right. All right, I'll just continue
Mhm.
a little bit. Okay, if we're back in the next chapter, we're Siska coming home. It starts off with her just coming to her apartment by her, alone late at night after she left Kilber. And this section here, she tugged off her uniform jacket and tossed in a chair, unzipped her blouse, letting him slip down her body and sagged to the floor, stepped out of the knee-high pile. That whole thing about going and taking a shower and the like, I wrote somewhere else and just took it and used it here. Anyway, so she goes to sleep and thinking about stuff and going over crap. Like, then we go like this: dreaming. Had she been dreaming? The older she became, the harder it was to remember her dreams, which I think the reader will identify with, and it's certainly true for me. Yes, there was a tenuous fragment, and then another one. She grabbed at the pieces, trying to bring the dream back to mind. Then it clicked. The slivers condensed into a memory. She had dreamed of her little sister. Not okay. So this next section, it had been a happy time playing dress up with her mother's put away clothes they found in a closet, dancing to Procol Harum. Have you ever heard of that band?
No.
Arguing over any meaning of its lyrics. Have you ever heard this song, by the way? She said, there is no reason, and the truth is plain to see that I wandered through my. Have you ever heard that song?
Mm-mm.
All right. So the whole concept, and I don't know, but the truth. Okay, why is her face so pale? I don't know, but the truth is plain to see. Siska laughed and pushed away. They held. Boy, I'm really need to check into that. I could have that. Anyway, they held hands and marched around the room singing and laughing and as loud and best they could. Again, English phrasing, as the song goes, and I give the lyrics. They were much too young back then to know anything about Vestal or virgins. Anyway, this is an important scene about the Procol Harum song here, and this as early on. I don't even know if when I wrote it, it necessarily had anything to do with this story, but I threw it in here, and I got to make sure I did so adequately. But it's a scene. Basically, the only thing I like about it is a few sentences in it, which is like. Playing dress up with their mother's put away clothes. I like that line. Anyway, it's a famous song. You've probably heard it before. It's usually kind of a psychedelic thing.
Mm-hmm.
If I think of it, I'll try to get a link on YouTube and send it to you, like I'm supposed to do with a few other things. All right, which I will. I'm just really busy today. I had to cut down several trees, or I didn't cut them down, but anyway, they. So anyway, this is just a little incident from her childhood. Now remember, there's a certain ambiguity going on about her young life, like before the age of 7.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a reflection of something she remembers with her sister. I'm hoping I didn't use it elsewhere. It's quite possible I've got the same scene or incident tucked in at some other point of the story, because I find it a important thing, and I want to, and I find, and without knowing what it's really hard for me to remember what I've already written, and when something's this old and long. Anyway, so but this, so Siska's at home. She's dreaming in bed, basically, going over things. All those long and simple days of childhood so quickly passing were the best days of life. No, the world had been so different back then. The changes had slipped in day by day, appearing so naturally, much like tea infused with the hot water of her mug. But then Siska's now considered what her life had become and would probably always be. And so she's she had a tough day. She's alone late at night, that 2 a.m. horror of second guessing your life. And guess what?
She dreams about Turk.
Yeah, she does, right? Isn't that where she's like, they meet and it's just kind of almost comic?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then she wakes up from that, right? Oh, yeah. Okay. It's been a while since I looked at this. Here's what happens. So she's having this brief dream about Harlow Turk. It's really her mind just going over, as a cop, going over the evidence, in the background of her. And then she gets a surprise phone call from Jez, which is now, again, all right, so watch what's happening here. Bad day, alone at night, 2 a.m. when everyone ruminates about their life, if they wake up. I don't know if that happens to you, but a lot of people have told me that. The 2 to 3 a.m. horror, they toss and turn when they wake up, thinking about what they need to do and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, one of those. And she recounts about all the people she's lost and Jez leaving, blah, blah, blah. And her job sucks. And then she gets the phone call from Jez. Now, this could be really good, really bad, right? But this is where it locks, basically locking in the bottom of the barrel sort of thing. And Jez is, happy birthday, love, nick of time, basically. So and they just touch base for a few minutes. Siska realizes that Jez wasn't wearing the ring from their ring ceremony.
Yeah.
So being that it's in the future and they can replay their telephone conversations as a matter of course, she's able to go back and make, look, something we can't do, or maybe we could on a FaceTime call. Are those recorded? I don't think so. Anyway, look at this. She couldn't bring herself to do it. She couldn't even crawl under the covers. She had been through too much, too fast. She needed to trust just shit. She wasn't wearing the ring. Still, it hurt. She hurt all over. But Jess had called. She didn't have to. She almost took her ring off, but she didn't. Anyway, but even so, there was nothing she could do about it. And with her new life, well, Siskantara and all the shit she was going through would mean less and less. This is the way things would be. And that dream, what was that all about? Out of the darkness of the room, she heard a voice. All right, so now the next thing, the book changes dramatic, or her life changes dramatically, right? Now, at the very end of this chapter is that sentence I just read. Out of the darkness of the room, she heard a voice. You said you weren't familiar with the Bible, but do you remember, like, if you look in the old books, Old Testament, like stories about some of those, Elijah, I think it was. Anyway, that line is sort of like from the Bible. I mean, it's not, but that same concept of the prophet was just like a child alone in a room, and he heard a still small. You've heard that phrase, the still small voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like that. That's why I've done that. So out of the darkness, she hears a voice. So this is sort of like a setup for the biblical concept of, this is like a prophet going to get their marching order. You know what I mean? The marching orders are coming in, but most people won't get that line. All right, we can move on past that. We're back to Turgenev, I guess.
Yep.
The pistol stuff is, and again, we're just breaking things up. We left Siska at a what do you call it? Hanging. Like, she heard a voice.
A cliffhanger.
We have to delay our getting that itch scratched. So we throw over to Turgenev meeting with Hobbes. Now, one of the concepts in here was the fountain of youth thing, where when Hobbes goes through in the office of the city administrator Hobbes, he sees him with a young teenage boy getting a blood transfusion. And we talked about that the other day, if you recall. It's an anti-aging thing. And they're even doing it now with fecal material and blah, blah, blah. So I'll probably add the fecal thing in here somehow when I have Malcolm Hobbes saying something about that too. Anyway, maybe not. But so he meets Hobbes, and he's trying to get his, but Hobbes goes into some detail about having invented a superior guillotine. And I go on and on about the guillotine. The whole thing about the guillotine thing that finishes the chapter, and this Hobbes thrill over it, I could leave completely out of the story. But I do tie it in with those mounted heads that he has hanging in the thing, where Hobbes, when Turgenev can say that Hobbes really had a thing about heads, and Hobbes, who's making whose fantasy is to make the perfect guillotine, or he ends up having his head on a plaque on the wall, like an animal head. You know that? I mean, that's what happens to him.
Mm-hmm.
So the guillotine thing, I could leave completely out, but it does work and fit in. What do you think? And it's all historically accurate, by the way.
It helps highlight the obsession, like you said.
Yeah. Anyway. But yeah, just for some reason, and this is, but these conversations just appear in my head. So like, oh yeah, we'll have Hobbes go on and on, about first of all, he's really into status symbols and getting that Scottish award, whatever it is, and so on and so forth. And then he ends up bragging on his Pierpoint device, and then he ends up dead and hanging his head. Anyway, I'm going to leave it for now, but I have a minor point anyway. again, I'm just trying to show the contrast between the way the elite at the top are living, who are totally out of touch with what's going on at the bottom. Oh, so now we have Snowden again. I got the same thing. Want to tell them truth, to live the truth later by Z. I've used that before. I got to take that anyway. So this is, to me, a fun scene. This is when Siska meets Snowden. I don't know how well you think it worked, but I like her snappy personality through the whole thing, man.
Yes, I love the snappy personality.
Yeah. Now, believe me, I have spent hours, days, months, years, centuries of mental time trying to figure out how should an AGI, how do you make an artificial person real in a story? You know, do you make them into a Sherlock Holmes intelligent kind of guy? Is he, you know what I mean? You could style him in any kind of way.
Yeah.
Similarly with Star Trek with Spock, you know, Spock was sort of the same thing, the intelligent alien thing who struggled with his humanity, you know, and didn't, and the jokes were always, you know, he didn't understand what it means to be human, so he'd always mess up somehow, you know, say the wrong thing, or you know what I mean, or not under, kind of like the same thing with Big Bang Theory and Sheldon, you know, fish out of water stuff.
Yeah.
What are you going to call it? So anyway, I wish I had a better idea of Snowden or cooler idea, but this is what I got. The sound, a male voice she didn't recognize, came through her viz, and she's like, please. She thinks a practical joke or something is being played on her, right?
Mm-hmm.
I often have her use the phrase GODDZ, gods, GODDZ. I've used it like 3 or 4 times in the book as a word I'm creating. The only reason I'm uncomfortable with it is religion is banned in that culture. So gods would be a really bad word, almost like saying fuck today in front of the queen, you know. So if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I'm uncomfortable with it, but I can't think of a better one, so I usually just keep using it. Again, it's just a new word the character uses and no one else uses, just habit. Anyway, I won't read it all to you, but basically leave me alone. And she threw out the covers, blah, blah, blah. And then they debate back and forth. Tells her a little bit about himself. Basically, he's on, what I want you to make sure you understand, he came in on a memory, on a thumb drive, you know, like we have today. This isn't one, but you know. He's on a thumb drive, but he's been zipped, compacted to fit. He's probably 20 terabytes in size, but shrunk down to whatever. And then when he's released from the memory device, he's able to explore this local internet, but not the comedy thing. Remember, that's the goal, is for him to get up into that. But so far, the rebels haven't gotten into the comedy computer system, but they can get into the local system. That's to prevent Deus Ex Machina shit. Because Snowden would, if he was able to do everything he could do, there would be no story. As you see, I've got him, you know, putting in fake emails here, you know, manipulating the system within the local police, but not with comedy. Otherwise, you know, there'd be no story. But you like their banter going back and forth.
Yes, it's interesting to read.
I think it's pretty good. and it accomplishes a lot of things, and gets it all set up. She gets to understand kind of what he is and so on. Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool too. When I had that concept of the whole of them is on this thumb drive, but a little piece of them that we've met. We haven't met the whole Snowden, just this little piece, right? Like the active part. And then later on he'll upload and kind of grow like, yeah. All right, next. Do you think it's plausible that, all right, so one of the things I got to get her to go to meet Harlow. So basically I've left it. The chief thing here is she's curious what the fuck is going on. That's if she gets the question answered, why was I tasked to look for Harlow in the first place? She's done. You know, she'd be happy, move on. But that's her chief rationale at getting up at 4 a.m. and going over to the hospital to interview this guy before he goes away forever. It works for me. What do you think?
It worked for me as well. That she throughout the book we do see that she is driven by curiosity, so having another instance of that curiosity driving her works for me.
Good. Yeah, and I also like it. I think, yeah. Also, I thought it was pretty cool is that he, you know, communicating with something in a plastic bag, you know, this stuff like that. And then, so you get a lot of that banter and humor going back and forth, right? So it makes kind of interesting and fun. Again, she thinks it's kind of a joke at first, but it works for me. I enjoyed it. I also liked it when she gets to the hospital and meets the guard sitting there and gets her to him. And so at the end of the thing, she pushes the door again, cliffhanger. So we're left with Siska. At this point, Siska and Harlow were just about, you know, we're pushed. What's the word? Cliffhanger here, and we have a cliffhanger with let's see. Yeah, the darkness shared a voice, cliffhanger for her with the Turk to the hospital, open a door, cliffhanger. And then we go over to all right, so then, yeah, so now he's in a hospital bed and Siska walks in the room. You know, really, I was very uncomfortable about what the fuck do I do now? What is should he be unconscious, asleep, handcuffed to the bed? You know what I mean? And how should they get along and all that? Also, issue. We have Siska at the bottom of the bear, you know, at the bottom of the bottle or whatever that phrase is, right? And everyone's gone. Her job, profession is questionable, and well, everything. She's got to find this out. But the whole point of that, and I mentioned this to you right at the beginning, is I had to make Siska vulnerable to do what's happening now. You know, because all in a period of hours, she goes from being a good cop to being a terrorist. Now, I've got her slipped into the system. You know what I mean? It's sort of that camel nose in a tent thing, but basically, it's not like he's handing her a gun and says, okay, we're going to go blow up a police station, right? That would be a step too much for our new terrorist. But maybe what he does here is all you got to do is let me go for an hour or two, and then we're done. So it's just a little thing she's got to do.
Yeah.
Now it's not all that little. I like the way it ends with her being knocked in the head and all that kind of. It works for me. The only thing that I think is an issue here is his argument to her. Okay, we got her as just about as what's the word? About as vulnerable as possible, right? So she's if there's ever a time in Siska's life when she's gonna go on the dark side, so to speak, it's now. She's curious about Turk. We got a little bit of romantic hint going, and she hasn't even thought about it, but it's there. And the reader knows it's going to happen if they're not dumb. So I think here's a question to you. What do you think? Does it work? Does being vulnerable at that point, the conversation she has with Harlow here, probably the most important thing in the story is her getting convinced to help him. Does it work? I feel I've made her vulnerable enough. Has Harlow's conversation with her been strong enough for her to do what she does next? I mean, that's a big important question here. So what are you thinking in that?
I think it works really, really well with everything leading up to it, and then how he convinces her. It gives her enough of that turning, and it feels natural for a character to decide, all right, I've just lost everything yet again. Might as well risk a little more in this.
All right. I mean, I'll trust. I get the feeling that a lot of the things I'm worried about, the issues really, so at least aren't anything to worry about, I guess. I don't know. All right. Believe me, I'm not going to keep you too much longer today. So there's hope. I'm giving you some incentive to stay away. This isn't going to last all the anyway. So yeah, but I think too, I appreciated the emotions that she goes through after this. You can it's very realistic to me. Maybe it's not, but I mean, it's like this. So you could also make the voice stress analyzer make it look like Turk here is telling the truth. Yes, but I did not. She's talking to Snowden. Of course you'd say that. A silence fell between them. Siska felt she needed to explain herself. Yeah, so the whole thing turns around to me, to what do I do? 2 days ago, there would have been no question at all. I did what I was supposed to do, arrested a wanted man, turned over to comedy, job done. A huge part of me wants it to be that way, but she gulped, fought back tears. Her police professionalism was about to collapse, and she couldn't have that. Not now. She gathered herself together and continued. Anyway, I won't go on with that, and then she turns back to Turk, and there was this boy, I thought he was dead, and I chased him, and so she's recounting this. Then anger flashed in her eyes, mixed with tears caught in the harsh overhead lighting. Her emotions were overwhelmed. But there's more of that fucking execution of, so I'm super pissed off. Her shouted words filled the room. The pistol wavered in her hand. Harlow stared at her, eyebrows raised. Snowden blinked, eyes wide. Anyway, even the AGI is surprised at what. Anyway, but you see her emotions are just all over the place. right? She
Mhm.
can be happy. Anyway, yeah. So I think it's pretty well done.
Yeah.
Now that story he tells her about the disaster in Idaho where he went through a door as a SWAT team and accidentally killed a baby with a rifle grenade or whatever. That story originally had nothing to do with this. It's just something that I wrote, and then I used it here, modified it, and tucked it in here. But that is this for the character Harlow Turk, that incident of him, being in the military, special for whatever, and going through that doorway, killing that woman, fetus, blah, blah, blah. Changed, it's the thing that took him down to the bottom of the bottle and ended up in Taiwan on a sweaty bed mat or something, drinking and whoring around. And then he gets rescued by the Texan, stuff we hear about later. Yeah, he hits bottom on a sour mattress on the floor of a Thai brothel, the classic hell on earth. Alcohol will take too long. He wants to shoot himself in the mouth to send a 45 caliber hollow point through that flappy thing that hangs in the back of his mouth, through that soft patch where he sticks his finger to vomit. Though whatever. Anyway, goes on. That whole story just popped into my head one time, and I just stuck it in here. Anyway, he do I have that in there? He is still in your story where he
Yeah.
wakes up in a hospital bed and I don't the kind of anyway. Hopefully I didn't put that in there. Anyway, basically there's a prequel here. I've got a whole Harlow Turk book that takes place before this where he's just on a mission somewhere, and these are all like taken out of that. But yeah, I got a pretty cool story about him in Chicago killing a guy. But that will be another book of its own someday, although I won't do it. All right, so yeah, if you're satisfied that relate in this critical chapter. All right, so we got Turk, we got Snowden meeting Siska and Harlow, and Harlow and Siska meeting, and you got Siska deciding all to kind of help him out. Very important chapter, and this is where the story really starts. Everything up to this point is just been to get to this point, right?
Yes.
One thing to wonder about is how far into the book page wise are we? I mean, is the pacing pretty good, et cetera, and so on and so forth. All right, so Harlow goes out on this, goes on about his mission, just briefly. Now Siska wakes up in the arms of her boss, John Kilver, and she's taken down to the hospital and looked at. That happened to me when I worked at the hospital. I worked at the hospital and had to go to the hospital emergency room. And so I'm kind of describing that. That's happened to me. Of course, that was self-induced by taking a pill that belonged to my boss anyway, it made me turn bright red. It was a pill for someone to make their blood vessels open up, capillaries. And so what I took, and I was doing all the same as I do now, lots of supplements and stuff. I take probably 30 or 40 different things a day. And anyway, I found a pill on his desk and I just took it and then went on about my business, and it caused me to turn beet red, and I freaked out, and anyway, it was nothing, but I had to go upstairs to the emergency room. That's where that came from. I thought I'd get fired over it, but my boss came back and said, never do that again. He was the best boss I ever had, man. He's dead now. Friend of his daughter, though. All right, so I feel that I do a pretty good job with the nervousness she feels afterwards. In the next chapter, that countdown, you know, where she's sitting at work trying to work with Kilver, getting stuff done, and she's looking at the clock every 2 seconds and freaking out, just like I would be doing. I'm hoping the reader would get kind of nervous too, as she's, you know, she's done the wrong thing and she's got to sit around at work, and it would just be so nerve-wracking, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So then we shift back to Turgenev, I suppose. And what's he doing? Oh, killing Hobbes. All right. I don't need to. We've talked about this chapter before. I came up with the idea about these 12 gauge slug things. You've seen 12 gauge shells, shotgun shells.
Yes.
The red ones, they're 12 gauge. Anyway, so I had this idea that they would be kind of like super glued to somebody, and there would be electronics in them, like blue, you know, Wi-Fi. So you could have an app and you could kill anybody who had one of these things attached to them anytime you wanted to, just by blowing their head off, basically. Right? And it's not I'm sure it's not a unique idea. I think there's probably been sci-fi movies or books or stories or something about people with having built-in devices like that the emperor can hit. I do know I directly drew this from Dune. Did you ever see the Dune movies or anything?
I haven't, no.
Okay. I highly recommend you do so. But in Dune and in the movies, because it's a pretty cool scene, the evil emperor guy, the bad guy, Harkonnen family, has a lot of people, I think a lot of people around him, but maybe just some, but they have what's called a heart plug. And a heart plug has a tag that sticks out of their skin, like, right? And basically, I could, if I wanted to kill you, I would just reach across the desk and grab your heart tag out or your plug, and it would cause a hole in your heart, and you'd bleed to death in 30 seconds, right? Anyway, so the evil empire Harkonnen or whatever, he was real fat. He's so fat and obese and shit that they got these anti-gravity belt on him so he can walk, but then he floats around like a foot off the ground. Anyway, they always show that in the movies. Pretty cool. Anyway, the heart plug idea is what I kind of adopted for these 12 gauge shotgun shells super glued to the skin. So they're a torture device, a murder device. And of course, Turgenev has a couple of them with him at all times. All right, so that's where that came from. And I like the whatever they're called. I should patent it because I don't think I've seen them anywhere. But yeah, super glue tips, an app for that. Don't ever let anyone attach one to you, I hope. All right, so I think that works. Now the only problem I have with the chapter I mentioned before, so I won't go into big detail there, but I do some crazy confused thing about, and I did modify it the last time I went through it and tried to clean it up. So what I have here doesn't match yours. But yeah, where Turgenev has come to Tara to meet in a confidential informant, this guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
This guy happens to be the guy that Turk is supposed to drop the thumb drive off with for his mission. Same guy, right? Plus, you got the guy with the Melbourne cell, his daughters with the, maybe that's still in there, I don't know. But theoretically, remember when I was, and I think this will be the last thing and then we'll stop. But it'll take a few minutes. All right. You relate the conversations about the upper level cultural, political, economics plot line, the high stratosphere stuff at the Texan and preacher level, and this is sort of going in that direction. Originally, that was complicated. I mean, originally when little sis was coming up with the idea that the terrorist weapon that they were going to use to attack the Commie Empire was going to be Dirk de Freitas's Snowden weapon, an AI virus, VAIRUS, which I coined. There was debate within Little Sis as an organization about whether, the same debate that the Texan had when he was going to release it. To make a long story short, let's just say that some elements of Little Sis wanted the weapon to be released, but there were others who felt it was too dangerous to be released, which it is. I mean, it's the nuclear bomb of the 21st century. It could totally change everything. You're releasing a device which could enslave mankind, right? You got to trust it. All right. So anyway, there were elements within Little Sis that didn't want it. So they were opposed to it. So I was having it set up so the Melbourne cell of Little Sis, which is where Kilver is, which that because that's where he comes from to the city later on. He was involved in that debate, and the woman was very opposed to and she was she was in Little Sis, but she was opposed to the Snowden weapon. Anyway, there was going to be some complicated nightmarish plot crap going on at that level. This is filtering down here. You get the idea?
Yeah.
So, but basically, going through all that. So this guy, whatever his name is, who dies here in a minute, along with Hobbs, I think he says something like, well, my daughter, and I'm here to pretend I'm gay or something. And, I just think it's ridiculous. Whatever. And then I was trying to, and then I just said, Turgenev just says, fuck, whatever you're doing just doesn't make sense and kills, because that's the way I felt about the plot. When I was writing, it's like, this is bullshit. I just might as well blow it up, and I thought, well, it works. I mean, maybe not obviously. So what did you so I'm kind of wondering here. I will admit that anyway, what do you think? Does it work? I guess when you're reading this from your point of view as a reader, and you're just coming along through the story, and you're seeing Turgenev showing up here with a Kosk and whatever, and does it work? Do you even just go by it sensibly, or does it raise any issues?
The one question I had was, how did he know? I don't remember if it went over in the book or not, but how did he know that was the informant?
How did Turgenev know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember we did on the shuttle from the space day, he says he's thinking about, what to do because he's been tasked to find out what happened to these satellites and shit. And he thinks he has, and he said, well, let's see, the one satellite was lost over Australia, so maybe Australia has something to do with it.
Yeah.
By the way, I need to tell you this that I forgot to mention. Yeah, there is a little sis part of the plan. They knew that when they released the Snowden weapon into the virus, as a virus into the comedy system, that the only reason the stuff in outer space was happening is they knew they had to cover their tracks. They're getting rid of this. Basically, they were getting rid of the surveillance satellite that would have tracked them, Harlow leaving the city. That's why an Ungo 7 noticed that satellite was gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was the original concept, and that there was going to be, not only was the Texan doing this plan with the virus or having those computer chips and setting up LS as a distributed freedom fighter group, he was also in space doing something. Now, yeah, I do believe that what you said, I think it said there that there was, I just happened to flatly say a confidential informant in Terra who was aware of something crazy going on, that he, you know what I mean? That was one of his elements that made him go to Australia. We don't know how he had any contact with this confidential informant. I never gave it any thought. Just I'm assuming it was in his. I could throw another sentence in there to clear that up, I suppose, which I'm willing to do. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so what do you think of the, again, horror of having two people get killed with 12 gauge slugs in their brains?
I think it's another very good display of his psychopathic tendencies from Turgenev.
Yeah, and he ends up stealing the head and putting it up on a wall, alive. So, or not aware, perhaps, but anyway. Yeah, anyway. So I just ran that little head joke. Basically, a little side thing, a head. Just kind of like an inside joke going on. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
Not important, though. Basically, I wrote the murder scene itself before the murder. Like, I had I wrote the section where Harlow comes to the room to meet the people and finds them dead. I had that all written, and then came back about a year or two later and thought, well, it'd be pretty cool if Turgenev was the guy who, killed those guys, and so I brought Hobbs over to that house. And it made the confidential, so it was all later on done. So I had the murder scene, and then I created all this shit to kind of hopefully pull everything together reasonably. But okay, go on.
Yeah, no, I think it did really well in pulling everything together. I like the continual head joke and just the karma of having his head mounted as well.
Karma, that's the word. Yes, the karma. Yeah, and then another of the big issues coming up in the next chapter, which I have here, called Siska Freet. So he has, here he is, dead body. He's on his mission, blah. It's all blown up. The guy he was supposed to report to is dead. Turgenev or Hobbs is, I don't know. And then he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't want to dick Siska over. He needs her help. So I really have, anyway, so he doesn't know what to do. So he calls her up. I've really modified or changed this back a lot back in the old days, years ago. And I'm kind of happy with the way it ended up being. What do you think? Does it make sense that he would contact Siska then, or? And then
I mean, maybe not right away, unless it pre-established before here that he didn't have contact with the Melbourne sect of the Little Sis.
right.
Okay. Yeah. With that pre-connection or with that pre-establishment, it does make sense for him to get a hold of Siska first, because that's the only person who's aware of what he's doing right now other than his dead contact. So it's about the only place he could turn to.
You know, it just occurred to me there isn't something else he could do that I created later on that would have been a reasonable possibility here, or at least it should have been a check mark thing. That's that Kong Sentian, the 14K guy, you know, who he ends up working with, raiding the police or whatever jail cell. That guy, you know, you could say, God, I need help, I'm stuck. And then we could at least mention that as just throw it out there as something and then dismiss it and go on, but at least it would be there. I think that would help.
Yeah.
I think Siska does a good job of hurrying out of the police station and getting over there and helping them. And I kind of like that part. Okay. But I wish because at the end of the scene, Harlow's in jail, arrested. So then comes, because I knew I was going to do, I think I already had it written where the Snowden and her were going to go break them out, you know, which hasn't happened yet, but yeah. Okay. So anyway, I think we've made a lot of progress today. The book, the plot, the story within that we have here is all launched. Everybody's, you know, we're moving along. The plot thickens. So yeah, and you know, originally breaking Harlow out of jail was it. Book over, done. You know, I don't know. I never had given any thought. And then I thought, God dang it. Well, he never did. He's got to complete his mission. So thus came book 2. But yeah, but like I said, it started out as a short story, right? So I do think the Siska Freaks chapter where Siska stood alone in the lobby of QD, her mind racing, wondering what to do. She was in huge trouble. What excuse did she have? Well, you know, going on and on. Yeah, so what did they tell you all about in 2 minutes? She hung up. Kilver looked more frustrated than relieved when his image faded from Biz. Anyway, so just a little quick chapter getting her to meet. All right, I'm gonna stop here. We've gone 3 hours, so made up.
Yeah.
All right, so tomorrow's Friday. Are you wanting to meet again tomorrow at 1?
I can do that. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, the only thing I'm going to go to Quincy tomorrow and buy a screen door. Yeah. All right, and I'll put those links together and get them to you. And anything else?
Nope, I'm good to go.
All right. Take care, dear. Take care. Talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
And